Welcome back to another episode of Global Card Collectors. Today we have a return guest, Keith from the Dallas-Fort Worth metro area, also known as Dirk Nash T. Dirk Nash T. Dirk Nash T. Back on the pod. We're going to talk about his collection, and we're going to get into later a discussion about fantasy, both football and basketball, kind of strategies a bit, and how they might relate to cards, or mostly not. I think we we might get to that point. But anyway, Keith, thanks for joining again. How you doing, man?
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I'm excited. I gotta say I'm a little nervous. This is the first time I've done a podcast or anything on video. So hopefully I don't make a fool of myself or, hack up a lung while we're chatting or something like that. But I'm excited. Thank you.
Right on, man. Yeah, we did those all European teams back in the spring, or all international teams, I should say. Rest in
Yeah.
peace, Dikembe Mutombo. He
Yeah.
was on those teams, and but yeah, I guess we didn't do video. We just did a pod on that, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
No, I had a podcast for a while and never once did I record on video. So yeah, this is all this is a little new for me, but it's cool.
cool, man. So as I introduced a bit, Keith is from the Dallas area, grew up there, and just can you introduce yourself a little bit more to our audience? Teams you support, kind of that kind of thing, and how you got into cards, of course.
Yeah. I mean, so I grew up in DFW, like more on the Fort Worth side. Uh, the card thing is pretty easy. Like when I was young in the early 90s, right? Junk wax, you know, I was gathering and collecting a bunch of baseball cards, almost all baseball at that time. Didn't really branch out to other sports, although I played like every sport growing up, like as a kid. Um, Ended up doing like switching to some. Well, I ended up getting my cards out in like college for some reason, and I ended up like getting a lot more into football because I was big into fantasy football at that time. Like, I had been in the league since I was in high school and everything. Same league I'm in today still. And so I did a lot of football then, even though my favorite sport to play was basketball. Like I would go to the rec at college and play, 4 or 5 times a week probably. But I never collected it, never. And then I put everything away, right? And then COVID comes, right? I got everything out, like bored one day. And then yeah, in some ways kind of like the rest is history. It's very, very similar to so many other stories that we've heard right from the card perspective. From a team perspective, like the guys I like collecting growing up were Texas Rangers. As a baseball fan, like Juan Gonzalez was my favorite. I had a whole bunch of like hundreds of Juan Gonzalez cards, right? Like all like, 92 Donruss, base and that kind of stuff. But
There's a famous like air card of his. I have that.
yeah, it's like, yeah, they have his batting stance flipped around the wrong
Yeah.
way. Yeah. I've got a couple of those too. Pudge, so Texas Rangers were my thing, like kind of growing up. All of the local sports teams are kind of my teams, right? The Mavericks and Stars and Cowboys and Rangers. Although in the last several years, I kind of lost patience for baseball, right? 162 games is way too many. My wife doesn't like baseball. I've definitely like kind of come to her side, and I basically just like dropped baseball from like my fandom. I don't follow it really at all. I don't watch it. I just kind of dropped it. That's when I picked up soccer, right? Because I could watch like once or twice a week. It's 2 hours. Set the calendar to it, and ended up just sort of picking a team to follow and watch, and that team was Liverpool. So got real big into that for a while, and yeah. So I would say like all the local teams are like my teams, but the Mavericks are definitely like my favorite of those. We go to Stars games periodically. We go to Mavericks games periodically, and then one outside team would be Liverpool for soccer.
Right on, right on. Yeah. I have a similar trajectory with you with baseball. I mean, that was my number one as a kid, and yeah, I just if unless the San Francisco Giants are doing well, I'll follow kind of that. But otherwise, I don't even know. I don't even know who's in the playoffs. I mean, I know the Dodgers are, I think. Yeah.
I I don't know either.
Yeah.
Like I was at my brother-in-law's house. He's a big Rangers fan, and he had the game on, and I watched like an inning, and it was like probably the most continuous baseball I had watched in years, probably. I mean, it was crazy.
Yeah, it's really is an interesting kind of how that's changed quickly. And yeah, it is just too much to follow. Yeah.
I mean, the Rangers won the World Series last year. There was a time in my life that would have been like the biggest event in my life, you know? And like I think I guess I did watch some World Series games, um, or at least parts of some World Series games. But like a week after, hadn't thought of it again since. It's crazy.
Yeah, the world changes.
Yeah,
We live in volatile times, politically, geopolitically, and and sports wise too. It changes really quickly.
yeah,
Um, cool. So, you know, I think your handle suggests you have kind of a well, Cowboys, Mavs. Which do you like one more than the other? I don't want to
yeah,
pigeon.
definitely. I mean, Mavericks for sure. Like I don't. I also, uh, we cut live TV a long time ago, right? That's one of the reasons it was so easy to drop baseball and stuff like that, and pick up soccer because I could watch it on apps and stuff like that. Uh, but anyway, the answer to the question is like definitely Mavs. Like I would choose a Mavs championship over a Cowboys Super Bowl 100 times out of 100, and twice on Sunday, right? Like for sure, Mavericks above all else.
When did you fall in love with the Mavs?
Yeah, so when I was growing up, I told you I was a big baseball fan, right? And collected baseball cards. But I have like very good memories of laying in my bed, like as a kid, 6, 7 years old, and watching. I had a small TV in my room at that time, like watching uh the three J's era Mavericks, right? Jason Kidd, Jamal Mashburn, Jim Jackson, watching them play when I was supposed to be sleeping, right? And but I didn't like follow it that much. My dad wasn't so big into it. So I didn't follow NBA all that much. I just kind of watched when they were on. Um, and then I started like a friend of mine that I worked with at Subway when I was working in high school. I was like 15, right? Working at a Subway,
Right.
was telling me, he's like, you gotta start watching these Mavs. Like they're fun. And all throughout this time I played basketball. I loved basketball. It was like definitely my favorite sport to play of all of them. But I just didn't watch the Mavs or the NBA much. And he was like, you gotta watch. Like there's this Steve Nash guy, there's this Dirk guy, and like Michael Finley. Like you gotta watch. They're fun. Um, and so that's about when I started watching. That was around 1999, right? Like right like probably after Dirk's rookie year. I don't think I watched a lot when he was a rookie, but the year after, almost started watching every game, like basically from then on, right? So all of the early 2000s 50-win teams, the 2006 run to the finals and everything. Like I yeah, that's really when I started falling in love with the Mavs.
Great time to get in, ground level with Dirk.
Yeah,
I mean, you kind of, I mean, I know you, and people should guess from your handle that you're a big fan.
yeah,
He's probably your favorite. I know he's your favorite Maverick of all time. Uh,
yep.
so how did, I guess, how did that develop? Was that just kind of an instant, this guy's awesome, I can relate to him, his game, or?
Well, in some ways, I thought I was Dirk because I'm 6'5", right? Growing up, like, uh, I was a good shooter, but I don't move very well. And I don't mean like for like a 300 pound don't move very well. I just mean like for a relatively like tall but not so athletic person. I don't have like great handles or anything, but I could shoot pretty well. But all of my coaches at the time wanted to put me on the block. Like that was like back to everybody was back to the basket if you were the center, right? Even when you're 8 or 9 or 10 years old. And that's exactly what it was like for me. So seeing Dirk like step out and pop out and hit jumpers and stuff was like, yes, that's what I want to do. So I guess I did connect with him a little bit from that perspective. But I think more it was just like, leading the team. He never was like a problem, right? So it was like easy to like him just as a fan, a local fan. Um, and yeah, just all the things that he went through, kind of culminating in the championship, like being called soft and that he can't close. Like all of those things were like major narratives when it came to the Mavericks and Dirk in the early 2000s. And just seeing kind of like the progression and overcoming that and everything, it was so cool. And that the fact that he stayed with the team for 21 seasons, took pay cuts, dealt with like a rebuilding after after winning the championship, like
Hmm.
did all of those things, like just kind of did the good soldier thing. Uh, I don't know, it's just really endearing and made it so easy to like him, right? And don't have to really defend it to anyone. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I saw even something on Instagram probably, he's like, Dallas is my home now. I've lived here longer than anywhere else. And
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. And he's working with the organization, right?
Yeah, yeah. I don't know what his role is. Like he was some kind of consultant or something like that. But yeah, I mean he's
Yeah.
still affiliated with the team in some ways.
Yeah, that I mean that title, and I think a lot of people feel the way I do, and I'm sure you do, but on a different level for you. But I love that Heat win. I mean, it was just I mean, I was my first year in Istanbul, and I was just glued to it, and and just it was just so awesome because the Heatles and the whole thing, and it was incredible.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's one of those things where like the perspective is kind of difficult to get from like the inside of like the local metroplex and sports commentators and all that stuff. But it felt like the first time that people were on the Mavericks, like the general public were like on the Mavericks side. Like I think everybody wanted the wanted the Mavs to win, almost everybody. So that
Yeah,
was a lot of fun.
yeah. I mean, I'm sure like the Cowboys, everyone kind of hates nationally, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I think of that. So yeah, I don't have a sense of Mavs. I mean, I should come out and admit that I was a Mavs fan in the '80s. You know this, but because I hated the Lakers so much, still hate them more than any team. And they took them to 7 games, Western Conference Finals, I believe in '88. And so I started rooting for that team. Mark Aguirre, Derek Harper, Rolando Blackman, James Donaldson, Roy Tarpley, Detlef Schrempf. He might have left the team before that run, but anyway, and so I always kind of had that kind of duality. I mean, I'm Kings fan first and foremost, but anyway, I've never felt the hate towards them. So anyway,
I don't think people hated the Mavs. I think it was more like just the narrative was like they're not championship material. They're chokers or just soft or like whatever, right? Like, and remember their offensive style was like a little different, not quite like the Suns became right under Nash, but it was like even after Nash left, it was still like there's too offensive. They can't play defense. Like they're just not like championship material, right? So I don't think people were like really rooting for us, but they definitely in 2011 that changed for sure.
no doubt, yeah. I think globally, yeah. I mean, I remember talking to a collector from Spain, and he also was like, yeah, that was great, kind of.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think Dirk winning that title was important for European basketball too. I mean, kind of showed that they had arrived, because that narrative is based on this kind of European, Europeans are soft and etc. Right, and
yeah.
I think it's starting to change. You would think it would change with these two, mega superstars, in Luka and Jokic, but I still think it's kind of there. I still think there's like a hint of it, especially with Luka. People don't like Luka. I've realized this, which is very interesting to me.
It's definitely true. I mean, they just don't, and I've kind of accepted it at this point, but that's fine. There's players I don't
Yeah,
like too. I don't like
yeah,
Dwayne Wade,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
so
exactly.
it's fine.
Yeah, no, it makes me like him more actually, I'd say.
Yeah,
So in terms of Dirk, so I mean, you got back in during COVID, you said, and
yeah.
how did you start navigating? I mean, I know that was one area where you really started looking at cards.
Well, let me back up just a little bit because in before COVID, out of nowhere, on a whim, like I was getting groceries and I bought a couple blasters of, I think it was actually two different trips in a week, right? Not around 2008. Bought a couple of Prism blasters, 2008, 2018. Bought a couple of Prism blasters. Didn't know what I was going to do with them, right? I hadn't looked at my cards in like 10 years, right? Like literally they had been stuffed in my closet. And I remember, I opened them and stuff and I pulled out like this Luca Prism base. At the time, like I didn't really even, I kind of forgot what parallels were and stuff, right? Like, I mean, I'm telling you, this was the first thing I just, for no reason, I just kind of opened. Then I also got a Prism Luca Green and a Green Emergent and a couple of other cards. Like I think there was like a Marvin Bagley refractor and stuff like that. So I remember thinking, I was like, this is really cool. Then I packed it away, put it back in the closet. So when I got everything out, that was one of the first things that I looked for. It was like, hey, COVID, prices are going up. I heard on a podcast somewhere that, looking at the card market is going crazy. I remember I got this like Luca card. I'm obviously a Mavs fan. I pulled it out. I looked at it. It's this one, the
Nice.
Luca green. Yeah,
Iconic.
it's yeah. And so anyway, so I started like looking at prices, and then I got really excited and everything, right? And then for a while I was doing the thing that a lot of people were kind of trying to do at that time, right? Like the buy and flip and invest, right? But I was more interested in short-term stuff, but I wasn't interested in, paying hundreds of dollars for cards. And I still don't have many $100 plus. I mean, I've got some, but I don't have like a major collection, with $1,000 valued cards and stuff. But so I was trying to do a lot of that. It was a lot of fun, right? Because I love kind of keeping list and keeping track of things and like looking at stats and like doing all the stuff, like both player stats and, market trends and those kinds of things. I love all that stuff. So I had a lot of fun with it. But eventually I was like, okay, well, like I'm not gonna do anything, making 75 cents on 7 cards a month or whatever, you know what I mean? So then I got into what if I want to really spend some time on this, what will last that I will appreciate, like in the future? And I was like, I've got to have more Dirk because I didn't have much Dirk. There's a couple reasons for that. Like his rookies, those cards they're pretty ugly. Almost all of them are like ugly cards, awkward pictures, awkward poses, bad designs. Like the 1998 time frame for cards was like not great for at least for Dirk.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
The tops. Yeah, I guess the tops. That one's I got that one and it's just horrible. Yeah. I gave it to you, right?
you did. This is the
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
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 Like, look at that's like his flagship rookie. That is the
Yeah.
most awkward. I mean, yeah. So anyway, it was that point when I definitely was collecting Luca and like other Mavs. I was buying like Josh Green and stuff like that at the time. Jalen Brunson, bought a lot of Jalen, sold a lot. That's one of the players I did very well on. Um, but then also focusing mostly on getting cool Dirks that I enjoyed or just that I liked. Um,
So what are your, what would you say your
yeah,
top?
so this one is a 2005 finest refractor, right? Nothing super special, right? That's out of what, 249, 349. But I really like it. I can't get it to refract very well, but I don't know. I just like that. It's like kind of the classic Dirk, jump shot fadeaway pose. It's a cool card. I like that design. I got really enamored with the Larry O'Brien, right? And there's several cards that have players holding the trophy or something because to me, as a Mavs fan, like the 2011 championship was like the biggest event. I mean, I've got a kid, I've been married, I've I've had some like major life events that are like definitely at the top, but beyond those things, you know, winning that championship was one of the best. And so like I saw this one, which it's mosaic, right? I understand people don't love it, but I don't know. It's just really cool. Him holding the Finals MVP and the Larry O'Brien. It's a Genesis, right? Graded
Yeah.
10. I uh I really like that one. I've got a couple other ones of a couple other parallels, like the gold wave, not the gold parallel, but the gold wave parallel, and some other ones that look really cool. Um,
You and I might be the only mosaic guys. I love
I would say
mosaic
I'm a
too.
big mosaic guy, but that particular card, I just love that he's holding the trophy. Like that means something to me, and I can't afford the Panini 1-and-1, right, $2,000 versions
Right.
of like something that commemorates the championship. So yeah, that's what I ended up with.
Right.
I've got a few others, but like those are probably two of my favorite Dirks. Nothing fancy. I would love like, even though I'm not a big fan of the Topps rookie. I mean, I would love a Topps Chrome or ideally a Topps Chrome refractor. That's probably been mostly out of my price range. At least nothing I've felt comfortable yet with. I probably could, but it's like
Right.
I don't want to spend that on something that I don't know that I'll love. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, I feel you. I feel you. I have one Dirk card I'll show you. I mean, I think I've shared this with you before, but this is
Yeah,
the
the Mina mystery.
yeah, I'm collecting that set. So, um, the Mutombo is also in there. I mean, that's why I like this set. It
Nice.
just kind of got all the international players in it, the greats. So Mosaic right back at you. But yeah, the photogenics. I mean, there's one of him hitting a shot you shared, right?
Yeah, I don't have that one. I don't have that one. I've been searching for it. I mean, it's not hard to find necessarily, but I have just haven't bought one.
Yeah.
Um, they have some like parallels and stuff that I've been kind of interested in. So I don't know if I don't know if I want to spend $10 for the base or go up a little more for one of the parallels or something. So I don't have that one yet, but yeah, that's definitely one that's like in range, in
Right.
range for me. I imagine I'll end up with it at some point.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you've been talking about that a while. Glad to hear it's still on your radar.
Yeah,
Yeah. One thing you were saying too. I mean, I just have to back you up. Keith used to have a podcast, Dirk Nasty Pod, and he shared on there. I mean, it's evergreen material in the sense that of what he talks about, just in terms of uh, player evaluations. And I mean, he really is like a stat nerd. Just loves to pour over the data. He sent us our other friend Nathaniel like a sheet of how he's analyzing cards. So I mean, you're really totally next level from what I mean. I consider myself kind of average, but you're very impressive in that regard.
yeah. Thanks. I just enjoy it. Like we'll talk about fantasy sports in a little bit. Like for me, it's not like setting lineups. It's not watching the games on Sunday. It's like trying to figure out like it's just pouring through the stats or the data. Like I just enjoy that aspect of it,
Hmm.
of everything I do. I play some like simulation baseball games on the internet that I've done for a long time. And it's the same thing. I keep my own spreadsheets and like I don't know. It's just something I do. It's like that's the main part of the hobby that I love uh as much as any other part, at least as much as. So yeah, I spent a lot of time kind of going through going through those kinds of things, but it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. So just before we go to that though, what about other maps? Do you collect any other players?
Yeah, so I mentioned already I did a lot of I was a big fan of Jalen Brunson's, even his like rookie year, right? First pick of the second round. All the attention was on Luca. Jalen never really started at least the first couple seasons. Then had this a playoff series right against the Clippers where he's kind of like almost like relegated to like almost not playing or like very very minimal impact, even less than the regular season that year. But throughout this whole time, like I remember going to games and telling my wife, I was like, I really like Brunson, like, and just the way he carries himself, like you can see it now, especially on the bigger stage in New York. Like he's been that same guy, like pretty pragmatic and seems pretty level headed. And I don't know, I just really liked him. So I did a bunch of Jalen Brunson stuff, but I started thinking, it's like, okay, I was a big fan of a lot of players and a big fan of the championship team, but I don't have any like Jason Terry. I don't have any Sean Marion, and it's really hard to find cool Marions in Mavs uniforms because it just what didn't last that long. But
Mm,
I love Sean Marion on that team and Tyson Chandler and those guys. But I really started focusing on Jason Terry, and actually it started with our friend Nathaniel. He gifted me a through the mail autograph
finest of you.
of, and if you, it's actually the same set as that Dirk that I showed earlier.
Yeah.
So it's a Jason Terry refractor, finest refractor, autographed through the mail. He gifted that to me. And so after that, I started picking up other parallels. There's the X Fractor,
Oh,
the
that's cool.
black. I've got the gold on my radar. It's one of the few searches I still look for every time. And then I started picking up other Jason Terry, like black and gold refractors from other tops or Topps Chrome sets. Um, I don't have much JJ Barea, but he was always a fan favorite here. This is one of the ones that I do have, it's Cornerstones. Um, I really like that one. That was cool. This one I actually picked up at a local card shop, and it was like really under, I think it was like 15 or $20 it was like listed for. And so I was like, I'll take that beret. And he was like, I didn't know that was in here. I don't know if that price is right. I was like, okay. He said, but I'll give it to you anyway. So anyway, I was like, yeah, okay, cool. So so I don't have a ton of other like historical Mavericks, but definitely like some of those Jason Terrys. Um I got a couple Jason Kidds, from going back to my time as like a 7 or 8 year old, like laying in bed sideways watching the three J's and everything. But yeah, those are some of the others that I like. But mostly that top shelf there is like mostly Dirk and Luca, and then a few of those other guys kind of sprinkled in.
Right on. And then I guess bottom shelf is non-Mavs. Is that
Other, yeah.
other? Okay.
It's a couple football cards, a couple soccer cards, non-Mav basketball stuff, and yeah,
Nice, nice. It's funny you showed me these finest because today, exactly this morning, I was just kind of looking around for King's refractors and stuff, and I saw the set for the first time. It's funny. I never really seen that design. I liked it online, and seeing that you have them and like them now, I'll probably peruse more.
yeah. I mean, I do like them. I think it's kind of cool. Like, I don't know, maybe I don't know. Like, you would think maybe that basketball like kind of taking up so much space, or this basketball like design taking up so much space is not ideal, but I actually really like it. At least the refractors. Um, there's a lot of sets I do not like, but this one I actually do. So
Right
if
on.
you're curious or interested, you might check one out as a test case and see if it's something you're interested in.
I'm thinking about it. I kind of want to our test in a Kings uniform, but I don't know if that's the right year. But maybe a page as kind of my fallback with Kings post '04. I guess you
I
said
still
that's
love Page.
'05.
Yeah, 0506 finest.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay. Um, cool, man. Um, well, I guess we'll now move into part two.
sure.
Unless there's something else I want to. Oh, I did want to ask you though. I'm a fan of Lively. Uh, What's your, you like him, I think. Yeah, how do you feel about Lively?
Yeah, I mean, so as a fan, he's the perfect kind of player to have on your team, right? Like high energy, positive energy mostly, right? And even when he gets like aggressive, it's not bad aggressive, right? It's like the good aggressive. I've seen him like he's the kind of guy who's like the first to the floor, right, to pick up a teammate, right? Um, as a basketball player, like for most centers that we talk about, right? Like we would say, well, he's never going to develop a jump shot, right? So like we can't collect him and stuff like that. And that's probably true with Lively also. And I don't really see him ever being a shooter. I don't see him extending to three. But like as a fan, he's a ton of fun to watch. Just super energy, athletic, and go up and get the lobs and everything, which it kind of be I think Luca really likes, and just like I don't know, just the effort and positive energy that he seems to bring is really great. So he's great as a fan, but I have a hard time seeing him ever being kind of like an all NBA level player,
Yeah.
maybe all star, like injury replacement all star level. But I just don't know if he's like as versatile enough as you like really need to be, because I can't think of a big who is like strictly a rim roller who can get to those levels today.
I mean, was Gobert an all-star?
Yeah, 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 he was. And
That's
I don't think he'll be the defender to Gobert is either, but I mean, I definitely think he can be extremely impactful, right, to winning based on his energy and effort and defense.
yeah. I mean, obviously, I think kind of a. I mean, I'm just impressed by how much he played as a rookie. Obviously playing in through the finals, and I mean, he held up his own. I mean, he had some rookie moments for sure, but I'm just impressed with that, and obviously great fit with Luca. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
Luca's big ass can just in a pick and roll, and those two, like, it's just it's hard to stop.
Yeah. I mean, he was starting games, not every game, but he was starting games early on in his rookie year. But towards the end of the year, when the Mavericks really went on their run and towards the end of the regular season, he was definitely playing a lot. But it wasn't like he was clearly the best big on the team. I mean, Daniel Gafford was starting most of those games,
Hmm.
um, and playing very well. Both were playing very well. But like he was kind of clearly the number two center in the rotation towards the end of the regular season. But then once the playoffs started, he just kind of continued that energy. He's a he's a passable free throw shooter. I think that kind of matters, right? Where Gafford maybe is a little less so, and just continued to get the trust in the minutes. And yeah, that energy like just never ended, right? Night to night to night. You could always count on him to kind of bring it. So it was fun.
And he was the guy, right, who like kind of was like running away from Chet to get fouled, or is that someone else?
Yeah,
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 okay.
yeah. And then everybody was telling like I think it was Jason Kidd and others told him it's like no, don't run. Like you're there, right?
Right.
Be confident. I think it was more of a be confident kind of thing.
I love it. I love it. Cool. Well, yeah. So as I already teased a couple times now, I guess. I I just kind of wanted to have a conversation. I've been wanting to have one for a while about fantasy sports and how they relate to cards. And maybe this will be more of a fantasy discussion, but recently on what was it? Carlson Cards, Austin, his podcast, he had Josh Johnson on of the crossover, and he, co-owner of what is it, Card Ladder. And he's been picking up like one of ones, of course, like cards out of our budgets, of like past kind of 2010s fantasy football, American football greats. Guys like Aaron Donald, Tyreek Hill. I want to say maybe I can't remember some other names, but these kinds of guys who are out. I mean, he's a big Todd Gurley guy as well.
Yeah.
And for him, I mean, he's saying, I don't want to mischaracterize him, but he's saying that, he has nostalgia for these guys, as winning him championships in fantasy football. Um, but he also admits it's like a kind of an investment thesis, that others are going to think this way, kind of, and looking back on our fantasy teams. Now, you're someone who has done fantasy football longer than I have. I've actually done basketball since 2000. But so starting off the question, like, do you think you'll have nostalgia for guys on past teams? Like, what do you think of that kind of? I mean, obviously in cards there is kind of an anticipatory, when kids who grew up in the 2010s or in the 2030s and they have disposable income, yeah, maybe that's what they'll feel nostalgia about. It makes sense on that level.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I definitely do have nostalgia for players in the past. Um, I will say before, just as we set up the fantasy conversation, like I have been, I've done fantasy football for a long time, been very deep into it. I told you, like, I love the stats and the prep and all that kind of stuff. Like, that's part of my favorite part of it. But I kind of dabble in football cards and vice versa in basketball, where like I was very big into basketball cards and kind of dabbled in fantasy basketball. So I've got a little bit of a juxtaposition there, but definitely from a nostalgia perspective, there's several players that like carried me to championships that I look back on fondly. One of them I actually did collect for a little bit. I told you in college I was doing a lot more collecting, like a lot more like LaDainian Tomlinson. He went to TCU, right? Which that's a DFW Metroplex school. It's in Fort Worth.
Yeah.
And it was a big deal because like at that time TCU didn't have a lot of credibility, but he was like in the Heisman conversation. I mean, it was a big deal. And then he was kind of the number one overall in fantasy for maybe 4 or 5 years, at least three, maybe 4 or 5. So like that was one of the players, and I had him a couple of years, led me to championships. Like he was great. So definitely nostalgia for him and guys like Jamal Charles, kind of the same thing, UT guy, right? And University of Texas, and also was kind of the number one like player at the time in fantasy football, led me to a couple of championships also. So I definitely have a few players like that I have nostalgia for, at least me personally. And maybe, I'm sure he runs in different circles card related than I do, but like I don't I don't actually see myself going back and like trying to collect any cards of those guys. In fact, I sold a lot of LTs or LaDainian Tomlinsons when I started getting back into it because it was like, I wanted to put it on my, I wanted my goal, my personal goal is to have a little small display of cards that I really love.
Mhm.
It's like once I kind of decided that his didn't really fit there, I just kind of let it go. So like I don't see myself going back to those guys, but I definitely think, I mean, fantasy football, daily fantasy sports, just in general, um, are a big part of a lot of people's lives, especially the kind of the more gambling adjacent, type people. I could see maybe people with the means and the will to do so, like wanting to come back to it. I just don't see it as something that I would really want to do.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it does make sense. I just, yeah, whether a fantasy title gives you as much. I mean, it's not as much as like obviously Dirk winning a title for your team.
Yeah.
Um, so uh,
I mean, I guess you could like maybe you put a lens on it like this, right? Like of all people who collect cards, football cards, how many do you think are like real big into fantasy sports? Probably a good portion, right? Like 90 or 80 or 90%
yeah,
more, maybe.
I'm
So
sure. Yeah,
a twelfth of those, right, win a championship year, and there's probably like a 10 or 11% chance of those championships that they actually have one of these guys on their team that in that championship year. You know what I mean? Like it's just like you kind of start whittling down the population of people who would like really be interested in that. Unless the idea is like, oh yeah, I remember I was like big into fantasy for 5 years, and even though I never had him, Marshall Falk was awesome. I don't think that's the thesis probably, but yeah,
yeah. I mean, for me, the one American football player is I mean, I picked Derrick Henry. Like, he kind of like disappointed 2 years in a row, and then he was going in like the fourth or fifth round one year, and I drafted him again. It was like 3 years in a row. I was like, I can't believe I'm doing this, but then he
yeah,
blew up, and it was like awesome. And then during the boom, I did get I got a couple cards of him. And I still have one actually, but I'm trying to sell it, but I don't want to sell it too low. Like I do kind of have, I don't know. He was just so awesome. Like, so, yeah, we'll see.
that's yeah, yeah. It's tough, man. I mean, and I one of the reasons I never when I got back into cards, I didn't get that big into football cards was the position players, running backs, wide receivers, like really don't move the needle for a lot of people. Like from a card perspective, from a lot of people. Like I never really got that, but like I thought Andre Johnson was amazing, right? He played on
Yeah.
the Texans, like bad Texans teams, um, and I actually collected a bunch of his cards at the, when he was like kind of coming up and stuff. But like your Derrick Henry, Chris Johnson, right, ran for 2,000 yards, right? I don't know how many people have done it. Surely only a small handful, right? 2,000 yard season. I mean, I can't imagine it's like even I can't imagine they're worth that much, nor can I really foresee a future where someone's like really clamoring to go. And I guess it only takes one. Maybe that's the thing, right? It
Yeah.
only takes one person who really wants it, but
Yeah. Yeah, I mean the whole non quarterbacks, not having really any value it does make you just kind of wonder if it's just all kind of like how much of the market is like do people actually want the cards
yeah.
um themselves, or is it just kind of I mean, because quarterback prices are insane compared to other sports even. And people, it seems like that segment that card, football cards, American football cards are the most like kind of investor driven areas, I would say.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. That was one of the things that ended up kind of being somewhat disheartening for me from a card collecting perspective after I got back into it from the boom. Like I was a part of it, right?
Yeah.
But and it was because it was fun to do. It was fun to like invest and try to flip and all those kinds of things. But yeah, I mean, eventually you just kind of look around and it's like, okay, no one actually wants this stuff. No one wants these base prisms, right? Which was the card, in basketball. If you're just kind of picking one to look at a value and say, what is this player worth or whatever, right? Like no one actually wants to keep them, or very few people actually want to hold on to them as like the thing that they collect, or at least it became that way, or at least it felt that way, even if there are people who do. And it's like, okay, I mean, if the only thing that we can properly collect are like one of ones and like out of 10 gold refractors, then like I guess I don't really have a place here. You know what I mean? Until I just determine like, I'm just gonna buy cards that I like that I want to display, and then I'll be happy. And that's kind of where I pivoted. And I've been happy since. That's not the direction you were taking us. I'm sorry, but yeah.
No, that's what I mean. Wherever we go, it's fine. And I agree that I mean that's kind of where I've dropped too. I mean, I'm guilty just like you of totally falling into that the vortex of COVID. It was fun, I mean, for the first
It
time
was
you
fun.
could kind of like bet on your players. I mean, it's kind of the only way to like bet on players cards.
Yeah.
So it's fun. I don't know. I mean, I lost
Yeah.
more than I won, but so what? Like it was fun.
But but to take that same conversation back to fantasy, right? Like
Yeah.
um I was thinking, the fantasy football this year, a big part of the prep this year was like more than ever wide receivers, hammer wide receivers, right? Like a lot of like pundits in fantasy football, like people were saying this kind of thing more than ever, right? Like when I was coming up, it was, running back, running back, running back, running back, right? And then other positions. Now it's like you got to have a solid receiver room. There's good reasons for that. But like at the same time, guys like, I mean, I don't know, right? Again, I don't follow the football card market that much, but like Amon-Ra St. Brown, AJ Brown, Nico Collins, like all of these guys are kind of like top 10 fantasy receivers. None of them are old. I mean, AJ Brown's like maybe 26 or something now. They're not like old players, but like I don't know, but I can't imagine their card market is just like through the roof because they're top 10, fantasy receivers at the currently like most important position in the fantasy football landscape. So I don't know. I just have a hard time finding like making that correlation sometimes.
Yeah,
But I think there is things to look at if you want. I don't know. It's just difficult.
it is interesting. I mean, yeah, I mean, like Justin Jefferson. I don't know that well either, so I'm not going to talk much about the market. The market. I just know I don't hear much about it. Um, there's a Stacking Slabs podcast. Brett. I mean, he has a lot of collectors on of football cards, like team collectors and that kind of thing. And those guys are just seem like genuine collectors, right? I mean,
Yeah.
um, so he's a Colts fan, and he wants to invest in Anthony Richardson, or he wanted to. I don't know how he feels about that at this very moment. But he's just like can't do it. I mean, it's just it's crazy the prices on the quarterbacks. Whereas like, I mean, to me the receivers are actually the most kind of amazing players on the field in some ways. I mean, they're the most fun to watch and kind of, in some ways. So it's a unique sport, football. I mean, obviously quarterback is like such a most important position in sports, all that. So
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it really is. I definitely get that. And I mean, it's a different story for a different time probably, but like one of my favorite cards is a Peyton Manning rookie that I pulled and I remember pulling it.
right on.
Um, but I mean, you're a Niners fan, right? So like I know that you were looking for some Brock Purdy's stuff, at least in the past. Did you ever look at Brandon Ayuk or Debo Samuel?
No.
Yeah, and I think I understand why, but at the same time, maybe I don't understand why. You know what I mean? Maybe because there's two of them and there's only one Brock Purdy. There's only one quarterback. You know what I mean? I'm not sure, but
Yeah, I mean, I'm annoyed with Ayuk at the moment.
well,
But
yeah, me too. I have him on one of my teams. Yeah,
sorry about that. I hope he comes around. I don't think he's that good, but anyway. Um, yeah, I don't know. Like pretty story. Like I just bought an Optic Hollow PSA 9, so and I'm kind of like happy with that.
yeah,
That's just like a card I don't really want to sell. I mean, maybe if it went up a lot or something, I would, and then I'd try to buy it again later. But because it's just such a highly produced card. But yeah, I don't know. I think the Purdy story is kind of just amazing, and I think they're finally believing this year. But like kind of that feeling attracted me to it. But otherwise, I did buy a Jimmy G card. This is so true, man. I went back and bought a Garoppolo card. And then I do have a lot of Steve Young and Montana's from my childhood. Nothing crazy, but I love those cards. It is the quarterback. It just really draws you in.
yeah, yeah. It's so weird. Like, I mean, we talked about several of those guys. I mean, I told you I collected Andre Johnson for a time. I collected LaDainian Tomlinson at a time, and then I get everything else out. And I don't know if maybe I was too influenced by others. I'm not sure, but I just kind of looked at him. I was like, I don't really have love for this. Ended up like letting it all go, but
Yeah.
I'm not really sure why. The only cards I guess I have a Randy Moss up there, and I have a Peyton Manning, and maybe those might be my only two football cards up there. But yeah, I'm not sure why.
Yes.
One thing I do think is I think maybe it's one of the major reasons for the difference in like card collecting and fantasy sports is the seasonal aspect, right? At least for unless you're talking about like dynasty fantasy football, which I actually even though there's a lot of content related to dynasty, I actually think it's like a very, very small portion of like the majority of like most fantasy sports. I mean, for fantasy football, doesn't matter to me if Caleb Williams is going to be the best quarterback in the league 5 years from now, right? Like, is he going to play well this year or not? No, probably not. Is he going to be one of the top 15 quarterbacks? Probably not. Is he going to be one of the top 20? Probably not. Like I do not care about it, right? But like from a card perspective, you're probably thinking more long term, ideally, and saying like, yeah, he has the tools to be one of the all time greats or whatever, and like that's why people might be interested in like investing in him. But I think it's kind of that difference between like career expectations and seasonal expectations that creates a lot of this like difference in terms of or the difference from fantasy sports and card collecting
That's
because
really
even like
interesting. Yeah, I
yeah
mean, I mean, I like how I mean, you're saying too. I think that kind of the seasonal nature of fantasy almost makes football players less collectible because you have them one year and then they're out the next, and or you draft a new team the following year and you kind of don't have that like continuity with players, right?
yeah. And if you're I mean if you're well that and also like if you're thinking of young players to invest in, right, like the rookies and stuff, part of the price built in is like not just that they're going to come out and lead the league in receiving yards like Malik Neighbors this year, right? But that in 3 years, in 5 years, he'll be number one, the best, right? And like maybe I'll sell it this year, if he comes out and is an all star or all pro or whatever. But maybe 3 or 5 years from now, I can hold on to that and sell it for 10 times, what I bought it for instead of three or whatever. I think there's part of that, at least in the rookies, that's just built in, right, to the price. And for fantasy football, it doesn't, for most people that aren't playing like Dynasty, right? It doesn't matter what he's going to be 3 years from now. All that matters is like, is he better than my already third or fourth receiver or quarterback or whatever? I guess you wouldn't have four quarterbacks, but whatever. You get the point.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's really all that matters from a fantasy football perspective. And I think that's where a lot of the differences kind of come in. But you have a couple of examples from basketball that you were able to like learn from or not learn from, but like where fantasy basketball really put players on your radar, right? And I think there's something like instructive there that we can learn too.
Yeah, I mean, I do. I mean, you got me thinking about American football too, just in terms of like, I mean, it's almost like a new car. These guys, like they come out in their careers and they just kind of depreciate over time. Whereas basketball, soccer, I mean, soccer, I've really started to understand that it takes, long time for these prospects to actually develop, it's different than way longer than basketball. But yeah, I mean basketball, yeah, the big one I did well on in cards because of, I mean, I really got into Jokic because of fantasy. I mean, he was just awesome in fantasy. I mean, he still is. Anyone who plays knows. And I mean, anyone's watching the NBA, it's the stats, right? But I mean, I would just like, okay, like Giannis was like two times Jokic prices, in 2021 after winning the title. I'm like, Jokic is just way better. Like, I mean, I don't know, just looking at the stats, I mean, not way better, but so and so you could just see that, and that was, I mean, obviously, I think with Jokic, he's really not on the radar as much because he's Serbian, he's slow, he's he doesn't jump off with dunks and highlights and stuff like that. So I think he was really a sleeper in terms of that. But yeah, that's the one guy I've done like really well in cards on. The other guy is Shea. I could just see by like the second year. I mean, the guy was getting, he was averaging like 7 or 8 rebounds a game and like 2 steals a game. And it's like that kind of stat set is special in fantasy.
Yeah.
And so I do think basketball can kind of lend itself to kind of seeing this happen. Uh, but then you also have, of course, the opposite case. Like, you know, like I think I mean, smart fantasy people draft this guy in the top 10, but Sabonis on the Kings. Um, he has no card love. I mean, maybe if they win, he would, but I think that's the only way he would get it. But I mean, his stats are insane. I mean, he had like he now has the record for the most consecutive double doubles, and I mean, all this, and he plays all the time. That's the thing with like Jokic and Sabonis; these guys play, but that doesn't really relate to cards. But anyway, yeah, that's kind of my experience so far with it.
Yeah, as you know, like with actually one of the last episodes of like my podcast, one of the things I was trying to do was like identify can we like find the next breakout guys? Not talking about like a rookie who like in the second year takes the next step, but like more like the third, fourth, fifth year players who have this like unexpected type of breakout. And
The
like
Lowry
Jokic and Shea,
marketing. Yeah,
yeah, it was marketing was like the inspiration for that. Yeah, exactly. Because it's like, all right, I don't want to buy someone who I'm gonna have to pay rookie card prices for. I want someone who's already had the dip, but who still has the chance to actually like make good on it in a big way. Like, I mean, obviously Markkinen is not like he's like out here making first team all NBA and his card prices are through the roof and it's not like that. But if you I mean his cards were like bottom basement level prices. I mean, you could have bought probably for $1 and sold for 10, at some point.
definitely.
So like
Yeah,
my thought was like, can we get there? To do that, I looked at a bunch of seasons, consecutive seasons from a bunch of players who like broke out based on like this methodology that I kind of put together. Shea and Jokic were both in there. Um, because while I mean, I included like a breakout, not just like someone who's just sitting on the bench and like awful, and then all of a sudden, but it's like going from one level to the next, like bench starter to like almost all star, that kind of thing. And both those guys were in it because like the first couple of years they were good, solid players, but not people who were like necessarily like setting the world on fire that had a bunch of buzz and people were like really, really talking about. Some people were, but not most people. And the one thing I'd found in that was like the thing that consistently improved on these like breakout type guys was just like playing time and usage, right? From a basketball perspective. It wasn't like huge increases in efficiency and those kinds of things. And I think Shea and Jokic, when you think about them from a fantasy perspective, the things that they do well, they've kind of always done well, you
yeah,
know? Like you said, Shea, getting the steals, and contributing in other categories, rebounds, but also high free throw percentage, right? Like those kinds of things. Same with Jokic, right? High field goal percentage, high free throw percentage, hits a couple threes. Not a big, 3-point shooter, but he'll hit some. Assists, obviously. All of those things he's pretty much always done. But at just over time for both of those guys, they kind of increased their playing time, right? Nurkic left, right? Or Shea got traded to OKC, and then Paul George left, and or not. I guess Paul George was in that trade, but he got traded to OKC, right? And then
yeah,
like just more and
yeah.
more of that burden comes onto him. And I think that happened for both of those guys. So like maybe that is where the opportunity is from a fantasy basketball and card perspective, like in that second or third year, like identifying those guys who are kind of like post hype, you know,
Yep.
post rookie hype guys, or they just never had the rookie hype and are not yet like are on their way there, and the foundational stat stuff is like good, and they have a path to more playing time, more usage, etc. Like maybe that is where the opportunity is.
Yeah, I mean Brunson for you, I think. I mean obviously that's like the essence of cards too. Is like you want to be right. You want to be the guy who, bought Luca before he was good, or whoever the player is, right?
Yeah,
Um, so trying to kind of suss that out. I do think it works in basketball, but a little easier to forecast just because the guy is going to get better. I mean, generally, like there are third year leaps, there are fourth year leaps, and that kind of thing. So, um, I don't know. I do think. I mean, I remember when I got back in, I heard about it. I think you said you heard it on podcast. I heard about NBA Top Shot on a fantasy basketball podcast, and
yeah,
that's how I got back into cards basically, and I remember thinking to myself, well, I do understand fantasy pretty well. I am kind of ridiculous about it. I'd probably be good at cards, right? Because I understand like the league, I think better than the average person. But I don't know what comes first exactly though. I mean, is it like do the cards lag the performance, or is it vice versa? Because I mean, sometimes quickly the performance can kind of let's say like a title or something, or not a title, but like, I don't know, like Edwards. Let's take Ant, right? Last year, I mean, his cards blew up right after beating the Nuggets. Um, but I don't think his performance is quite where his cards should be. I mean, right? If you actually
Yeah.
look at it. So, do you have any sense of what lags, or is it just kind of case by case?
I think it's very case by case, and it's very like heavily dependent on priors, right? Like I think one of the like for Anthony Edwards, he came out, cards were super high, high expectations, prices high immediately, right? Like number one overall pick, highest cost player from card perspective in his class, right? So as soon as so like a lot of people were in on him. Things have been like pretty good. Maybe it kind of started a little slow and then got better. But like over time, still never really met that kind of number one overall. So people, I think in that case, people are just looking for. I mean, this is just my opinion. I'm not an expert in this stuff, but I think it's like
Yeah.
people are looking for, and myself included. I love Edwards, and I have a couple of his cards. Are just looking for that confirmation. Yes, this is the guy that I invested in. I'm gonna buy more. Like, and I want, and so I do think it is very, very, very case by case where the guys you mentioned, the like Shea. We'll set Jokic aside being a second round pick, right? But like
Yeah.
Shea, lottery pick, not a top five pick, but lottery pick. Um, Never really had those kind of expectations, even like from a card perspective, even like as a rookie, even in the second year, even in the third year is kind of toiling away in OKC as they're winning, or losing, 50 games a year or whatever. Um, so I think it is very case by case because you can. I think it'd be probably a very easy argument to say that Shea's career heights are like higher than Edwards. Now he's got a couple years on him also, but yeah, I think if you just compare those two cases, right, like it is very, very clearly a case by case thing. And I think the way you distilled it is probably exactly right, better than I have, which is you want to look for those chances where the prices lag the performance and not the other way around.
Right. Right. Um, I didn't ask you, but do you have anyone who fits that description coming into the NBA season?
Well, I really haven't done that, so I would say I guess I would say like no, right? I don't want people like to do because I did spend a lot of time on that at the beginning of last season, and the guys I
Yep.
came up with, there was a few, but Alperen Şengün was one. Right, I really liked what like his like profile looked like, and we could spend a lot more time getting into like what that means for me at least. Jalen Johnson was another, and I think he was probably would have been the best like hit from that performance or that analysis that I like did and shared
Yeah.
because like all of the underlying metrics and measures were like pretty good for him, and he was like pretty clearly with John Collins leaving last year, stepping into a more playing time and like really just kept it up until he got hurt, and then everything just kind of crashed after that. But those are a couple of guys that at the last time I like really dug into it. So I
Yeah.
don't want to just like say names out, on a whim, but like the last time I really dug into it, those were a couple of guys that really popped for me.
No, you did. I mean, I remember. I mean, I was in on Johnson as well. But you saying that from your analysis, and then I did. I think I bought one card and flipped it. And so it worked. But I wasn't ready to go big on it or anything. Yeah, I mean this year I don't. I mean, I'm starting to do my prep. This is we're recording in early October. But the one guy that's like really intriguing me right now is Emmanuel Quickly on Toronto.
Yeah.
Just because of the opportunity. Um, he was really good towards the end of the year. And just as you said, opportunity is way elevated there, and he's on Toronto. Like one of my philosophies with fantasy basketball is that I really like to target small market teams like Sacramento, Indiana, Toronto, Orlando. These markets where they're just trying to win, because they don't have huge markets. They're not going to be saved if they tank, or and they're probably not going to win the title, but they're going to play hard every night, and just to make the fans happy or whatever. So And I like ones that are kind of playing for like playoff seeding, right? Um,
Yeah.
because then you get non-hyped guys and you get guys who are going to play more likely than not. Versus sorry Kawhi, but you deserve it. Like I'm not drafting Kawhi Leonard like ever. I could maybe trust Kyrie. I actually don't have anti-Kyrie. I think he's people can change kind of thing. But I think a lot of people feel that way about Kyrie. Like I will never draft him again because of what he's done in the past, right?
Yeah.
Um, there are so many guys like that actually in the NBA. So that's kind of my one piece of advice. Indiana's a great team that way. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, those kind of under the radar teams that are not tanking, because then you don't have guys available later in the season for the playoffs.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I've like learned a little more. I mean, I think I don't know. I mean, I'm not an expert in fantasy basketball, right? But like one thing that I've learned is like, at least for me, is worked better when I kind of pick a direction and stick with it, right? One of those directions is like sticking with the counting stats and punting basically the percentages. You know, I don't care if my team shoots 41%, right?
Yeah,
Or 65% free throws, like compare, when everybody else is like at 70 or 73, like as a fantasy team. Um, but if you're going to do that, playing games, being available is major, right? And I learned some of that the hard way. I think one year, like in our league together, I drafted, I think it was Kawhi and someone else who like constantly misses 30 or 35, 40 games a year, like half the season basically. And it was tough to deal with. It's not a lot of fun having to replace, your first, second, third, fourth pick every week or whatever. Um, but yeah, I mean that's one of the things that I think I've learned too is like if that is going to be if it is just like rack for me, it's a little easier, right? Because I don't have to keep up with it quite as much. It's like just try to rack up as many of the counting stats as possible.
yeah.
However that fits. I don't care about percentages, but if I and rebounds and assists and steals, I'll do pretty good.
Yeah, and I think that's more fun too. Like I mean I don't I started in 2000. We play 7 cat, so there's no free throw percentage or turnovers. It's much more fun. Only field goal is kind of the negative one.
Yeah,
And but now they have points leagues, which I think are even a better entry. They do count turnovers, but it just kind of decreases your overall score. It's much more similar to fantasy football, American football, in terms of, you just try to get as many points as you can. It's more simplistic, but you don't have to worry about field goal percentage either.
yeah,
And so, to me, fantasy should be fun. So having, why kill yourself in these 9 cat leagues? And I think it's held fantasy basketball back a bit, just the category angle, because it's kind of like complex. Like I've tried to play 9 cat a couple times and it sucked. I mean, but I'm
yeah.
good at points. Points is easier to go to from 7 cat, and I'm good at my home league or whatever. But like, yeah, yeah. So it's hard.
Yeah, and one of the things that's at least for me, one of the things that's always difficult is kind of the daily aspect. So either you're playing in a daily league where I mean, even with fantasy football, I'm big into it. I've got, I play like money leagues and all that stuff. Like I love it. I don't want to spend every night checking on my fantasy team and like adjusting lineups and stuff like that. Like I can't do that.
Yeah.
So it's either I'm half-assing, my setting lineup stuff, or I'm doing it once a week, not knowing that so and so is going to pick up an injury that I cannot fix. Right? I can't do anything about. If I set my lineup on Monday and then on Friday and Saturday back to back, he's not playing for whatever reason. So it's like that kind of stinks too. Like really for baseball and basketball, which I played baseball for a while too. Like I mean, it's a give and take, but
I agree with you. I mean, it is the biggest problem. I mean, we do weekly because I mean, it's just like you. I mean, we don't want to be monitoring our phones all the time for injury news and that kind of stuff. But they should be played daily, probably. Um,
probably I agree.
but again, football, I think another one of the reasons why, several reasons why it's the number one sport in America. I mean, it's once a week, you know, set your lineup and have fun, go enjoy your day.
Yeah. Although I will tell you, I mean, now they have Friday games periodically. They've already done more Saturday games, right? Like in London and those kinds of things overseas. So now you've got Thursday, sometimes Friday, sometimes Saturday, every Sunday, every Monday. That's 5 out of 7 days where there's like potential for an NFL game. When it was 2 days, it was a lot easier. When it was 3 days, Thursday, Sunday, Monday, a lot easier. Now you're talking about like, I mean, I've definitely woken up and be like, oh crap, so and so has already played in London in the morning or is already playing, and I
Right.
forgot to even, I just totally forgot.
Yeah.
Like that's not a lot of fun. I don't love that. But there's people who are willing to like put in more time probably than I am at this point in my life, like that are probably happy with it.
Yeah,
So
exactly. Exactly. Good. Well, I think we'll leave it there. Unless you got a parting wisdom, fantasy wisdom for the audience.
no, well, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Just real quick fantasy basketball question. I have
Yeah.
always been enamored with people who do things like out of position,
Yes.
right? So and guys who are like solid across the board but aren't superstars. So like the Andre Kirilenko's, right? Who like points, rebounds, blocks, that kind of stuff.
He was the
But not
best.
points, not points in 25 points a game, but like he'll score 12, 14 points, 8 or 9 rebounds, 3 blocks. And you can play him at forward or whatever, right? Like or like Derek White, right, getting blocks as a guard. And those I've always been enamored with those guys. How do you work those into like first of all, do you like that, like the kind of balanced approach? And how do you consider those type of guys when like drafting your team?
Yeah, I think people are just drawn to points. So if you kind of fade that public view, that natural tendency, you can get greater value. Number one, Kirilenko is a god in fantasy. I mean, he
Yeah.
had like 2.3 steals and 3.7 blocks one year, something like that, and like 6 assists, 9 rebounds, 14 points. It was just awesome. Sean Marion, by the way, you mentioned him earlier. And he was like the one or two player, like Garnett or Shaq. It was kind of those years. Um, he was always up there. He was the number one player at least one year, if not two. I love that. I mean, my big target now is bigs who get assists. I mean, Jokic. Okay. I mean, literally like 6 of the last 7 teams in my home league won with Jokic on them.
Really?
Because you're getting two players in one with his assists,
Yeah.
right? So like I have the 5th pick in my draft this year. We already have our draft order. I'm gonna go Sabonis, and then I'm gonna go Şengün in the second round. So I'm getting like two bigs who are like scoring bigs. Not many bigs score a lot of points. I'm getting like point guard and a half out of those guys just
Yeah.
through my bigs, and they get steals and field goal. So it's just like I love the bigs that get assists and that kind of thing. I think those are gold. So yeah, the out of position guys. Derek White is sneaky with the blocks. That's a great call on that. Love those guys because they're underrated. So you can kind of
Yeah.
you know if you're getting blocks from a guard, you know, huge advantage.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, good. Because that's
Yeah.
that's like you're way more expert than me in fantasy basketball. Like those are the kind of guys that I always like really enjoyed targeting, like in kind of the sort of I guess like the not the first round or two, but like in the middle. It's like as I'm kind of rounding out my team, like how can I think of a different way to get at blocks or a different way to get at assists? And I think those kinds of things can be, or at least in my experience, have been underrated. But yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well,
Yeah.
thanks.
Bigs who shoot threes. That's another one people like to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Less special these days, but cool. Well, Keith, thanks so much for your time. I really enjoyed this. You can probably tell I got a big smile on my face for those listening. And
I had a lot of fun too, man. Thank you
yeah,
very much.
yeah. And good luck the rest of your football season and in basketball as well.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, man. You too.
All right, take care.
All right. Bye.